Well, I guess we can now just transition into robotics. So we have NRN coming on the show here in just a moment, and here
Boom.
he is. What's
What's up,
going
guys?
on?
How's it going, man?
Hey, Wei, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me
We
okay?
You sound
Perfect.
great. We had the Kodak team on. What was it, like 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
And obviously we talked about you guys a bit with that relationship you have. So excited to get you guys on. Glad you guys can make it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to this convo.
Cool. Well, we typically just get started by jumping into it with an introduction of yourself. We talked a bit in private chat about what we're going to be going over here. You know, yourself, the project, tokenomics, just the whole cat and caboodle. But start with yourself, Wei. We'd love to get to know you.
Sure. So my name is Wei, co-founder and COO of a company called Arena X. We actually started in Web3, building a game called AI Arena. So people may know us from those days. Since then, pivoted to more AI infra, specifically as it relates to gaming, but now more so robotics. So we've been building in the space for 4 years, and yeah, kind of happy to plug the gaps here on where we are with the robotics efforts, because that's something that we've been working on in the background for about almost 2 years now.
Can I just butt in? So I actually remember you guys from AI Arena days
Yeah.
and migrating. I believe you went to Arbitrum at first. Solana was a little early back then, but can you just run through AI Arena and like what the key learnings were there and what that
Yeah.
product was? I believe it was like AI agents fighting each other in a gaming context, but yeah, if you want to run through
100%.
that.
Yeah, so AI Arena actually still runs. There's still an active player community around it. We do tournaments and competitions every month. So the game is, like you said, it's like a Super Smash Bros-esque fighting game. But the gameplay is actually very different. You're actually teaching these AI agents how to basically fight the way that you would fight in the game, right? And it's a very kind of, I would say, granular kind of training process, in the sense that you have a lot of flexibility and capability in teaching these AIs to do exactly what you want. So it's actually quite a competitive game. It's very high skill cap, and it features pretty, I would say, groundbreaking technology that are featured in these types of agents. We actually don't use large language models. All the models are developed in-house, and they're proprietary. And they feature a lot of elements that are actually being adopted and applied to robotics, which I can get into. So I think the underlying kind of technology stack that we built for that game, a lot of it is now being used in what we're doing to kind of train robotics going forward. And there's a very good reason why it's well placed for this kind of robotic theme that we can get into.
This video I have up, is it kind of demonstrating that sort of thing you were just talking about here?
No, this one actually features a new pipeline that our engineering team just built up. I think this it was kind of funny because we're close with Yellow Panther, and I said, hey, can I just take one of your videos and do kind of a demo in terms of this pipeline that we're building up? But what it showcases is the ability for us to basically train a robotic simulation policy with just video input. And this is quite significant as like a technological step, because historically, in order to get this type of motion, quote unquote, mapping, or what's called retargeting onto a robot, even in simulation, is actually quite difficult to do. And most of the time, what you would need is like motion capture devices to create that data. But what we have been able to do is actually just using an algorithm to take kind of the motion information from the video alone, and actually train a policy onto a robot in simulation. Yeah, I won't go into the technical depth, but this is something that is not easy to do, but gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of what we're able to do in terms of training robots using our kind of platform and pipeline.
That's super cool. Quick question: where are you guys based? I know you see a lot of this in China and San Francisco. Where are you guys working from?
Yeah, most of our team is actually in Toronto, Canada. I think 100% of our engineers are here. So we have I think 10 or 11 engineers now, and the broader team is about 18 people.
Shout out Toronto. Let's go.
Yeah, Are you from Toronto?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we've actually met before, which is funny.
Yeah, yeah, we probably have at some point. But Josh, you would know, the Toronto area has a lot of great engineering schools and
Yes.
many actually leading AI schools like U of T, Waterloo. They're actually like global heavyweights when it comes to like machine learning talent coming out of those schools. So we kind of enjoy having access to that talent pool coming through as a pipeline. Yeah.
Ironically, I actually know a robotics company in Toronto Business District, so it sounds like there is a lot. It's pretty much a hub for this type of stuff. Pretty cool.
Yeah. And wait, can I ask a bit about that video pre Dom? I don't know if you can bring it back up, but just the implications of training robots like this. Like, I think a lot of people are kind of waiting for that moment when robots are going to walk down the street and pick up garbage. And that's kind of like, okay, like, this thing is real. And like, right, here's the 10x, in GDP growth that we're about to see and all this kind of stuff. So like, is the implication that like you can just send a video into this model and then it gives of like a task that needs to be done, learns on it, and then like within minutes is like can actually replicate that? And then like previously, like everyone remembers Boston Dynamics and all those old robots. Like, can you just contrast that way of training to this methodology?
Yeah, for sure. The TLDR is with what we have built here as a pipeline, we are able to now extract value from the video data that is kind of like everywhere on the internet. And that's a pretty big deal because it just expands the surface area of data that's available to train robots. And the data availability problem is a huge problem in robotics. I'll contrast that versus large language models. Large language models have scaled very, very quickly in the grand scheme of things, primarily as a function of the fact that there has been this wide public data set called the internet that's been available. And that has served as like the core data that's been training these like very powerful language models. Robotics data historically has been constrained by the requirement to collect real world data. Right? To train a robot, you probably have to start by collecting kind of motion data that's coming from a human wearing motion capture devices, or now there's basically more kind of efficient teleoperation technology. But it's there's like an order of magnitude contrast between the data that's available to train robots relative to like large language models. So a lot of the projects that you'll see coming out in robotics is actually targeting to solve this data gap problem. What we've done here is because we're able to now kind of retarget motion information from just video information alone, we're able to now basically access a lot of the video data that's available already out there on the internet and use that as a source to train robotic policies. This just gives us an advantage in accessing a data set that most other people can't use yet.
Yeah, and I have to set the stage here because Tesla's autonomous robot program has added, I don't want to say trillions, but hundreds of billions of dollars to Tesla's market cap just based on their ability to build humanized robots. A big component of that is, the Tesla cars that have been driving around for years on end with 500 to 1 million vehicles, capturing the camera data and then training up those cars with that data. That's been a moat for Tesla and a large part of their market value. So what basically you're telling us is that you found a way to do something similar that kind of like almost negates maybe Tesla's moat in that way, and then do it with any video on the internet.
Yeah, I wouldn't say negates Tesla's moat. I'm not going to go out there and claim that we're going to be going up against I mean, I would lose all credibility if I said that. But thematically, I think directionally you're correct. And what the punchline is, with this type of pipeline, we're able to release a latent data pool that people have not had the opportunity to use historically. And that's just that is a an area of opportunity for us that's kind of unique. And this is something that still requires R&D. It's not perfected yet. Like, this is obviously a demo. To generalize this across all form factors of different hardware and things like that is not simple, but the pipeline in terms of the underlying kind of fundamentals have been built, and this is something that we're kind of showcasing as a demo here. And then the next step is actually mapping this policy, which is being trained in simulation, which is like this like digital environment, onto an actual, humanoid robot. That in and of itself is a huge engineering R&D kind of undertaking, and it's basically a general problem that hasn't been solved in robotics either just yet. So we're kind of implementing internal kind of methodologies on that sim to real transfer part of the pipeline, and that's always been an area that we kind of focus on. Like if I were to give like a core kind of soundbite about NRN and where we differentiate relative to most other robotics projects that you'll see is we focus on the models. That's where we play. We try to push innovation on the models that are powering the robots. I think most projects you'll see has some element of like data focus. We have our own kind of data aggregation and collection pipeline, but we're really about kind of R&D and innovation in the robot. In the model part of the value chain, particularly as it relates to kind of reinforcement learning techniques being applied to these models.
And what makes the model more important to focus on than the data?
It's not necessarily more important to focus on. In order to solve the problem of robotics, i.e. having kind of like these general humanoids that can do everything and just help us in general in real life, there are multiple different bottlenecks that we have to solve. Data is one of them. Models is another. And what the reason why models need to be innovated on is there actually has been this like broad kind of myopic focus within the AI thematic over the last few years on large language models. And that's not a criticism. Like LLMs have been incredibly valuable and useful to everyone. From a commercialization standpoint, obviously, it's one of the greatest products ever created. However, the type of models and how LLMs are trained takes a particular approach. And it's actually quite clunky, and it's a massive kind of a capital expenditure and technological lift to train these models one time. And then what you're doing is really after a really massive training run, when we're kind of querying these LLMs, what you're doing is you're running inference, right? The problem is you can't take that type of approach or architecture and just apply it onto robotics, because robotics are actually edge devices, right? And these things need to be able to run inference and compute and understanding of its like physical surroundings in real time with almost zero latency. So you can't really just load something that's really big in terms of these billion parameter models like an LLM onto a robot and expect it to work. So we have to actually explore our way more lightweight, efficient architectures of models that can run inference in extremely fast speed or low latency at extreme modest cost, or else you won't have the ability to actually realize this future where you have these humanoids helping you in the homes. So this is a fundamentally different way of solving the model problem that is required to scale this type of industry, which is dramatically different than LLM. So, and ironically, or fortunately for us, I think what people don't realize in terms of the types of agents that went into AI arena, the architecture of those agents serves robotics actually extremely well. And I won't go into the technical details, but like in AI arena, every single character is actually a unique and distinct model, and you're able to mold it through your teachings over time. And these things are running tens of thousands of passes of inference every single minute within the game. If you were to try to replicate that using a fundamental architecture that's similar to LLM, it would blow up your costs to astronomical amounts of money. You couldn't do that with traditional technology. So we're taking all of the things that we did with AI Arena that was kind of buried under the hood. So people don't really understand the technological sophistication behind the models that we created. And now these are actually extremely aligned with the problem statement of robotics in general, which is why we've, over the past 2 years have been working on transitioning our platform to fully service the robotics opportunity set.
I have another question around where this meets the hardware. So obviously you're building this ability to train hardware at the end of the day. There are a wide ecosystem of hardware manufacturers, many in China. I'm sure South Korea has a ton. The US has some. How do you work with hardware manufacturers to actually make this real? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Robotics is like very interesting because it is this combination. This is like a combinatorial problem with software and hardware. And you're right. Like most of the hardware manufacturers are in Asia, specifically China. And then obviously in the West, there are these what's called vertical integrators where they do basically everything in-house. So Tesla is an example of that with Optimus. What else? Like you have Figure, obviously, is another big vertical integrator, 1X, and you have the likes of Neura in Europe, etc. So we actually do work with directly hardware manufacturers through our, like we work with them through our NRN platform, but we also work with them through Sai, which is our other platform. And I know like prior to this show, I think the team mentioned, hey, like, the audience likes alpha and things that we haven't really talked about yet. And Sai would be one of those things. We've been pretty much building Sai in stealth, and we actually soft launched the platform over the summer. And Sai, I think the TLDR in the way that I would explain it is we're basically building the Hugging Face for reinforcement learning models. And the initial application area is robotics. And the way that we do that is we're able to spin up all of these kind of interactive environments and simulation to tackle challenging kind of robotics problems. And on Sai, we've already started to work with hardware manufacturers such as Booster Robotics, who make the T1 humanoid. Booster, you probably know them from, if you've ever seen like Robot Soccer World Cup and video clips on that, those humanoids are made by Booster. And we're current.
I got one pulled up right here. Is this?
This is the campaign that we're doing with them, and what they're interested in is basically sourcing more kind of an expansion of different types of, like, let's call it movement primitives or behavior sets that they can quote unquote load onto their robots. And they're coming onto Sai and working with us to basically reach researchers that focus on reinforcement learning to help create models that can be used for their T1 humanoids. So we've jointly launched a competition alongside Booster, and in that competition, the kind of objective function for researchers is they actually have to create just one model that can generalize and perform well across 3 very different types of tasks. This is actually quite difficult to do. This is, going towards like what's called the generalization domain. And this is the holy grail. If you're able to scalably solve generalization, then what you're really unlocking is this future where robotics is really kind of wholesale going to replace human labor across a variety of different types of applications. So the ability for Sai to basically, what we're doing is we're onboarding researchers from leading research institutions, academic institutions and schools, and then we're working with our enterprise partners to come on board to create these challenges and problems for these researchers to solve. And in doing so, we're creating this nice flywheel of a reinforcement learning community that are contributing models. And what we become in the center is the kind of like this hugging face for that model repository. And there are various different vectors that we can kind of monetize through that model. And you can just kind of take a look at how Hugging Face has been able to scale their monetization over time, and it will give you clues in terms of how we think about it as well.
Sorry,
all right, go ahead, Dom. I do have a follow-on question there.
Yeah, I would love to hear the follow-on question. I guess maybe for the non-technical people, what is Hugging Face? Just so I have an idea of kind of what you're building.
Yeah, Hugging Face is like a model repository. It's like a warehouse where you can like get access to all of these open source models for a variety of different application domains. And their whole incentive is they want to be kind of the open source aggregation layer of models for basically everything. And then how they monetize is actually they have an infrastructure where they can allow clients, primarily large enterprises, who are interested in using any of the models that are available on Hugging Face and deploy it in a very easy way, right? Without having to understand or having any kind of like backend capabilities internally. They're able to help you deploy and leverage the power of those models for your enterprise purposes. And then in return, they basically charge a margin on that service. So that's the idea with Hugging Face. So we're trying to become that specifically for reinforcement learning, which is kind of a gap in the market. And one of the reasons is reinforcement learning is particularly useful in what's called interactive and dynamic environments. And think about robotic simulation as an example of that. And it's actually extremely difficult to build a platform that can support like cross compatibility on these type of interactive environments and run these type of competitions and also benchmarking in a very consistent, standardized, and scalable way. It takes a lot of backend engineering to be able to do this. I think our objective is to become that kind of standard and attract all of the reinforcement learning talent onto the platform and become kind of the go-to destination for our models. And initially, the market that we're targeting is robotics because we think obviously the TAM is just like enormous.
So I want to tap into this, and thanks, Dom. I actually was going to ask about that as well. But so I've watched this, thing on AI 2027. And the reason I bring up AI 2027 and go search on YouTube and go watch it, there's some good creators that have done some good videos about it. It's a white paper where the leading AI researchers kind of like, math or think out the next like 5 to 10 years of AI development. And they kind of end up at these kind of really crazy kind of conclusions, all of which transform the world. And so I want to kind of take us to the bigger picture here and just get your take on where you see kind of things in this longer journey. But the premise of AI 2027 is that these models get so good by the year 2027, which is honestly 18 months to 2 years from now.
Yeah.
And then they start scaling up things like manufacturing and start, allocating resources, and then robots get built, which 10x's the labor force, GDP goes crazy, the stock market like goes massive because all this wealth is created. We've solved like global poverty, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In your view, like how do you kind of see this playing out in the next like 5 years if you were to say like this is like the big thing?
Yeah. Look, I think AI is the biggest thing. I mean, obviously in our lifetime, I think ever, in terms of like a technological theme, but also an economic theme. I think to contextualize how big this gets, I think one thing is to kind of contrast the sound bites that you hear out there in the market, because there's a lot of discussion around this is a bubble, like a speculative investment bubble behind AI, companies and industries, et cetera. And a lot of people just draw a straight line to the tech bubble. They look at valuation. They look at kind of the froth in the price performance of a lot of these like related stocks, and they say, look, this is clearly not sustainable. My personal view is that we're not in a bubble, because what AI has the power to transform is effectively like human productivity across all domains, right? So what we saw initially with LLMs is in the knowledge domain, right? LLMs disruptive knowledge work, and it will continue to disrupt knowledge work. We are starting to already see the junior level kind of roles that historically have existed in a lot of knowledge professions are rapidly disappearing, because AIs are just better at that, right? And you don't really need an analyst or associate in a financial services context anymore. You have an AI assistant, and as they become more agentic or automated, you can automate a lot of that workflow. And what that means is, human labor is being displaced. Robotics is the natural extension to everything in the physical world. And do you guys know how big the global GDP is for human labor? Do you want to venture
How
a guess?
big?
How
Big.
big? $50 trillion
Jeez.
annually. Okay. That's the TAM, $50 trillion.
Crazy.
So let's just assume for a second that we solve this problem of scaling embodied AI for physical labor and anything that's kind of requires us to operate in the real world. The market opportunity of a $50 trillion per annum market is staggering. And we are standing on the precipice where a few of these companies have a legitimate shot to be massive owners of that pie, right? Those being the likes of Tesla and a lot of these like leading kind of vertically integrated robotics players. I mean, even if you capture 1% of that pie, that's a staggering amount of market cap that you're adding to these companies over time, right? So a $50 trillion opportunity set, if captured by some of these companies, will sustain continued kind of expansion in market cap in some of the largest companies that we see on the planet. So is this a bubble of the long term? No. Now, what it is really interesting about this is that to fund the growth in these companies means the cannibalization of humans' role within the world, right? So for robots to capture the $50 trillion, it means ultimately human labor is getting displaced. So it's not an investment bubble per se for these companies, but this is a humanity level scale problem that we have to solve society-wise over the decades to come.
Yeah.
Right. So
and here's a great example. Like this is BMW's, I think, demo with Figure 1 or something, where this assembly line worker worked on an actual assembly line for, I think, like a month or something. It worked 10 hours a day when the assembly line was live, but theoretically you could have the factory of just robots. And I'm not talking about the ones that you see up here at the top, which are like on the line, which are single kind of purpose. These are general purpose, replacing the humans doing kind of the tedious tasks. Yep. And actually, Elon, he mentioned the Model 3 development actually was slowed down because they tried to automate the entire line. And one of the challenges he found was to get a robot to like grab a wire and another wire and then plug it in was like something that humans do really intuitively, but robots had a really hard time doing, and it just didn't work. But we're now getting to that future where robots actually can do those kind of like more dexterous tasks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even in the setting of a factory is still relatively constrained because it's not actually, they're not actually like interacting in the open world, and they have a more constrained set of things that they need to do. So a humanoid form factor in a factory is much more achievable on the timelines of over the next couple of years relative to, like, let's say a humanoid helping you in your home. It's not that necessarily that they can't, it's I guess from like more of a safety standard perspective, it becomes like a regulatory issue. So I think the proliferation of robotics is in these constrained application domains, like, labor in factories, industrial processes, things like that, right? Yeah. And that is already a huge market, and ultimately it will proliferate into every single aspect of your life. Now 2027, I think, yes, that it's rapidly approaching. The biggest bottleneck right now to that timeline is things like energy, metals, and materials. I tweeted about this the other day, and I think the unfortunate whole kind of like sell-off in crypto was kind of adjacent to this theme of this like recent headline around this tariff dispute around rare earths, right, and things of that materials of that nature. In order to scale these like robotics, which is hardware devices, you need a lot of things like these rare earth minerals and metals, and this is like astronomical amounts that we've historically haven't had to mine or process and refine and serve as inputs to make these kind of hardware devices. And now China obviously is very incentivized geopolitically to continue to kind of protect their role as the leaders on the hardware side. So they're being very protective in terms of exporting these metals and minerals because they've historically have been the biggest producers as well as the refiners. So now the US and the Western world has to rebuild that entire kind of supply chain, right? Which led to kind of this politicization of this new domain of like geopolitical battling, which is rare earths. But that's an example of the bottlenecks that exist. Like those things, like the physical world has to catch up with the amount of latent demand that already exists. It's not so much that I don't think it's like, I think Tesla and, like a figure, they're relatively close to having robots that can work in the context of like an assembly line. And they can scale that. Ultimately, what needs to scale is the materials that helps us to manufacture 10 million of these things, right? And then also the other aspect is energy. The US does not have the electricity capacity to service the demand of training and inference for AI models, just on LLMs alone. And now we're kind of layering on millions and millions of hardware devices that are all running inference on the edge. And the inference velocity of these types of models and these devices are many times way higher per unit than when you kind of query or ask a question of ChatGPT, right?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, go ahead. I want to contextualize this for people because people think maybe this is like running the robot, but what you're saying is there's these 3 to 5 gigawatt data centers being developed. A 3 gigawatt data center. There's, Wei, you would know, in Pickering, we have 6 reactors for the Pickering power station that produces like 3.6 gigawatts of energy. So we're talking these data centers are entire nuclear power plants worth of energy output. And that is just for training. That's not like running the robots themselves in terms of electricity. So I just wanted people to contextualize that. Yeah. I'm going to ask rare earths and metals. Like, is this a limitation on like the magnets or something that are physically in the components? Like, how do you see the rare earths playing into this?
Yeah. So things like lithium, graphite, tungsten, there's a whole bunch of you can get into the chemistry of the periodic tables of the different types of rare earths. In fact, all rare earth related stocks have been just on an absolute tear. Because of this geopolitical tension and how China currently has basically cornered the market on rare earth. So a lot of these things go into the manufacturing of the physical components of a robot, the batteries that power the robot, the ability to kind of scale a lot of this hardware over time is constrained by the availability of rare earths. And not just kind of the production and pulling it out of the ground, but also the refining, right? The midstream stuff. Like you can pull it out of the ground, but you have to, distill it, refine it, actually make it into something that's actually useful for the end product. So this is a huge kind of geopolitical tension point. This is all coming to a head in the next couple of weeks when Trump and Xi are going to, I think, meet in South Korea. And this is one of the biggest areas of discussion that the U.S. administration is working on with China right now.
These supply chains don't just spin up overnight, and the refinement is kind of environmentally not great process. And we've actually, over the last 20 years, outsourced that supply chain to China for even that reason alone. But we still use these materials in these kind of critical processes. Luckily Canada has a lot of these rare earths, but getting it out of the ground is kind of like step one. Politically, that takes a lot. And kind of it's a slow kind of momentum that needs to build. But this is like a national security priority.
Yeah. 100%. And I don't want to draw this conversation too off of NRN.
Yeah.
But
sorry.
This is a show where we predicate on investable alpha. I guess my question to you, Wei, would be what are you doing to position for this? Are you buying futures contracts to make sure you have good deals on these, or what's the best way to get ahead of it?
For our business, we don't touch hardware from the perspective of we're not competing in that value chain. We are users of hardware, so we partner with hardware providers, right? Because we use their devices to showcase our software. So our business is more software driven, which is on the model side. The positioning for us is there's kind of a bifurcation in the robotics industry. The vertical integrators are, I would say, because they're vertically integrating, they do everything in-house. They bias towards doing everything in-house. Whereas a lot of the kind of the companies in the East that focus on hardware, they actually aren't that advanced on the software side. So they actually look for software partners that can help them kind of develop more state-of-the-art approaches that they can load onto their hardware to make their hardware more interesting and commercially viable or attractive to end users that will buy their humanoids or other types of robots that they sell. So that's where we come in. We really work with enterprise partners as like a software partner. And then Sai is our ability to do this in a way that's way more scalable than if we were to just do it on our own, right? Because Sai is all about onboarding the best researcher talent from around the world as it relates to reinforcement learning, and then making that resource available to enterprise partners so that the enterprise can tap into this global network of this hive mind of reinforcement learning engineers and researchers. And currently, we have already onboarded researchers and engineers from tons of leading AI, machine learning, and engineering schools in North America. We're starting to expand to Asia. We have targeted schools in the UK and Europe already lined up as well. And we're about to kind of roll out more and more of these competitions that will draw in more and more enterprise partners to kind of collaborate with us in reaching this audience. And in the middle is the ability for Sai to become this kind of model warehouse, if you will, that focuses on reinforcement learning models. That's very much akin to Hugging Face.
So maybe explain how you guys derive value from this. We see these insane contracts going out where AI is poaching. A lot of this is surrounding AI talent and engineers, but poaching these people for $100 million contracts. Where do you guys drive a lot of value from bringing all of this to one centralized place?
Yeah. Obviously, there is this kind of latent monetization potential in having the ability to reach thousands and thousands of high quality engineers and researchers. The way that we can monetize is, replicating kind of the Hugging Face model, which is to basically ultimately monetize the enterprise partners, whether it's deploying of these models through our platform, whether it's sourcing talent specifically to solving their problems for some of the products that they're releasing. And, one of the ways that you can monetize there is through kind of a sponsorship bounty that you put on each of these competitions. One of the best comparables for that is a competition platform called Kaggle. Kaggle is like a data science competition platform. They charge large enterprise partners $150,000 to just list the problem on their platform, because they have basically millions of data scientists registered to their site, right? So enterprises go there and they pay for the privilege of listing. There are also other ways that we can monetize through effectively charging a margin on compute. We can provision and secure compute at a commoditized price level and then sell it via helping enterprises run these models for their own purposes, but we're basically charging them a margin. That ultimately is something, for example, in the Hugging Face case, where they effectively make the largest volume of revenue. So those are all kind of monetization vectors. The other area that we're really going after with Sai is actually making it also the benchmarking standard for reinforcement learning models. So if you guys are familiar with things like LM Arena, which is kind of like the benchmarking destination for any frontier LLM that gets released, we're basically trying to do that for all reinforcement learning models, especially as it relates to robotics. And the reason why that's important—
Can I ask, not to cut you off there, can I ask
Yeah.
what the competition looks like? Who else is doing this?
No one, because it's actually ridiculously difficult to become a benchmarking standard for robotics, because I can't begin to tell you how clunky the backend is. Like, it's impossible. Like, there are different simulation engines, there's different kind of containerization environments. In order to have something that's standardized where you can actually compare things on an apples to apples basis, it's a nightmare trying to make that kind of backend infrastructure work. So that's what our engineering team has been working on for the last year and a half. And now what we have is the ability to do that, which is really exciting. And just a side note on this benchmarking thing, and it's a great question that you brought up, like who else is doing it? We saw it as an opportunity because there's a huge gap in the market, and this is a critical service that needs to exist. And you can make an argument, things like LM Arena has made LLM innovation faster, because now there's a transparent third party, impartial party that can showcase results on these models without these first party companies cherry picking the results and just telling the market that, hey, we're good at everything. When in reality, like, businesses are self-interested in promoting their kind of software and capabilities in the best light, right? So we're trying to establish ourselves as that standard, and if we're able to do it and be the first to market, what it also means is just that we have tremendous distribution and attention and awareness from the entire AI industry. Because if you look at the frontier labs like OpenAI and Google, they take things like LM Arena extremely seriously. Like, we were talking to like DeepMind folks, and they couldn't stop talking about the fact that Gemini is now on the top of the leaderboard across all of these different benchmarks in terms of the new generation and its performance over kind of GPT. So this, like, as we become kind of the standard for benchmarking for RL and robotics, inevitably the frontier labs will have to come onto the platform, and we'll be featuring all the state-of-the-art models, and we'll be doing kind of comparisons across our benchmarks. It just gives us a nice attention, awareness, and critical mass kind of flywheel within the industry, where we become the destination. It actually makes all the other aspects of our business more powerful. Ultimately, how this relates to the NRN token is that Psi is actually the traditional kind of Web2 business that we're running. The monetization of that business ultimately flows back to NRN through kind of value accrual and basically revenue through things like buybacks, et cetera. Now, the role of the NRN token is to help us build the flywheel faster on Psi. So what we can use the NRN token for is to incentivize the contribution and aggregation of data, both from our kind of platform that we built up, but also through third-party projects. And there are many data aggregation projects in Web3. We're already speaking to a lot of them. And we can provide Psi as a venue for them to actually use their data and feature it in these competitions. Now, it adds value to Psi, but it also adds value to these data aggregation projects, because they can use this as a platform to showcase why their data is actually useful for robotics training.
Okay. Do you mind if I backtrack a little bit here? You said some awesome stuff about you guys becoming the standard, Psi becoming the standard for this benchmarking, game that you're playing here. How do you guys actually get to that point, though? Because, it's important to be there. You guys have everything set up in place, but you need to get there. How do you get to becoming the standard?
Yeah. So first thing is to solve the infrastructure backend problem so that you can actually be kind of a scalable, flexible, and impartial benchmark provider. We're already designing the initial benchmarks across the different, call it, assessment perspectives that we want to do. And basically, we will be applying some of the state-of-the-art kind of models that have been open sourced by leading robotics companies and featuring it in our benchmarking section. We also have brought on an advisor. I tweeted about this maybe a few weeks ago. He was the ex-CTO of one of the leading vertical integrator robotics companies in the world. We'll be able to share this soon. But he's a longstanding kind of insider within the industry, and he's helping us with kind of the product roadmap rollout. And it's actually upon his kind of like reinforcement of the idea that benchmarking is actually the wedge to really scale the entire platform, because it's a critical missing piece to the robotics industry. And he would know because he's one of the initial kind of technical guys that had helped kind of scaffold a lot of what is involved in this industry. So
how do you get people like that? You must be doing something pretty cool. Like, what's your pitch to someone like that?
Well, first of all, it's like showcasing actual engineering, right? Like, for better or for worse, like AI Arena, NRN, everything that we've done, like, we've led with tech first. Like, we're extremely R&D centric as a group. Like, we're probably the furthest away from vaporware that you can find in Web3. I'll just say that, right? So I think from that standpoint, like we never have an issue on kind of having conversations with legitimate players in the AI space. We stand toe to toe with them, and this is how we get into the conversation. We have a really good advisor network as well that gives us the connectivity into the broader kind of AI space, and we're having conversations with some of the leading kind of vertical integrators out there, like the names that we talk about, right? And they've seen Sai, they're tracking Sai, they understand what we're trying to achieve, and they're just standing by for us to get to the level where it's ready to kind of help them service their needs.
Cool.
So
Go ahead, Joe.
So one question I had, just kind of in the same line of thinking that you guys are, getting advisors on board. What's the role or the relationship between you and Kodak? Saw that you guys had a partnership. Where's the value for you guys, and what do you
Yeah.
guys stand to gain from that?
Yeah, so obviously, like, been following the Kodak team for a while. Excited for what they're building. I think some aspects of what they're building is very complementary to what we're doing. For this initial campaign with them, what we want to showcase is a version of the benchmarking framework. So what Kodak I think is going to be releasing is the ability for people to basically control, I believe is like robotic arms as actual hardware, and train a policy for these robotic arms. And they can, it's going to be like kind of open competition, right? And anyone can contribute data for the training of these arms for a policy. And we're going to be using Sai to basically benchmark all of these different policies coming through. To showcase the ability for kind of the benchmarking primitive that we're just talking about. Now, this will be a relatively simple version to showcase to the market, but the back end that's necessary to support this campaign is generalizable across more sophisticated type of benchmarking that we'll be doing for these like frontier models that these labs are creating. So this was a nice kind of complement for us to work on Kodak with, because it was an opportunity for us to kind of bring forward to the market this whole benchmarking theme that we're really tackling.
Love it. Yo, do you guys want to jump back over to the token? Because I know we were kind of getting into that before I brought us back here. So you said people can come upload data, add to the benchmarking. It provides you guys with valuable data and benchmarking statistics. In return, they can maybe earn tokens. Tell us a bit about the tokenomics, the token structure, just how that works.
Yeah. So admittedly, there's a big component of the tokenomics that are still under design. One aspect of the initial kind of utility behind the token is it will help us power our own data collection pipeline. So we posted kind of a teaser, I believe last week, that showcases one of the Unitree dogs navigating a maze. And that was trained off of data that was collected off of our platform. So we're going to open up that data collection platform more broadly in the coming months. And there, ultimately, what people are able to do is they're able to stake NRN token to create what's called effectively like a synthetic NRN token, which allows us to index who's contributing which stream of data. And then we have an internal algorithm that can actually measure the marginal value of each stream of data, because not all streams of data are worth the same. Some are way more valuable in helping the ultimate model perform better. So those streams of data actually gets rewarded with more NRN incentives. So this is the first component of the NRN utility, is kind of to power this data collection pipeline. We're also designing the ability for people to effectively contribute compute, which will allow us to run more and more models for them to be benchmarked on Sai. And that we're still in the process of designing the tokenomics, but there will be a staking element behind it, and probably a slashing function to ensure that people are kind of acting in good faith in terms of not spamming kind of the types of models that are training for the contribution of Sai. And then again, that would be kind of rewarded with NRN tokens. And then the third thing is we're thinking through, as we work with third-party data projects, who might become kind of a partner and bringing their data onto Sai as well. There may be other ways that we can feature NRN tokens in kind of a staking component in that process as well. I think one of the models to potentially think through there is perhaps maybe like a Vana type of data. What do they call it? A data. Are you guys familiar with Vana? It's called a data collective or something. I can't remember the official term.
No.
But
I'm honestly not familiar. No.
But yeah, there's different types of approaches that we can take there. But it's basically like you're able to kind of dump data into a collective reservoir, and then the
data lake.
Like I think they call it a vault.
Okay, data vault.
Yeah, or something like
data
that.
lake is such a 2010 term.
Yeah. But there's, you can design kind of like staking loops behind that, and you can potentially gamify it a little bit more, almost kind of akin to what Almanac is doing, right? Where like you're kind of contributing to a particular kind of data pool, and that if that data pool ultimately has market value because people demand that data for research and training purposes, and that data can monetize, then that vault itself can make more revenue, and you can share it amongst the people that actually stake behind it. So there are various different kind of design iterations that we're thinking through for different components. The key thematic here is NRN helps us accelerate the flywheel for Sai, and Sai is really the monetization revenue generation engine, which then funnels economics and value accrual back to NRN. However, I have to be very clear, Sai as a product is a Web2 product. People on Sai, they don't see anything Web3. We don't want them to see anything Web3. It's a traditional business, and they don't need to understand that what's actually accelerating the scaling of Sai is being helped by a Web3 community with tokens as incentives. But it does allow us to accelerate the flywheel on this traditional business faster. And I think this complement of design, I think, is what holds the future for kind of Web3 kind of token sustainability. Because it's not all about just like token utility for the sake of token utility. Like that doesn't fucking make sense. Excuse my French, but we know that tokens are a great incentive primitive. We know it's a coordination factor. We know that it gives us distribution and access to a global kind of labor pool, if you will. And let's leverage all of those positive aspects of tokens, but we don't have to build complex tokenomics just to make kind of the value accrual part of the flywheel work. Have that be an actual business that can scale standalone, and use this as a way to accelerate the scaling of that business. And I think you're now then marrying the best of traditional Web2 VC and massive capital raises to accelerate product development and scaling. But instead of just leveraging kind of VCs and their capital, you can mobilize a global labor pool to really converge and concentrate on that effort. And I think that's a great model for how I think the Web3 ecosystem can evolve going forward.
So maybe I could give a little context around that model. So it's you have this token. People can earn token via adding value to the ecosystem. The value then goes to Sai, which churns value in forms of revenue, which ultimately closes this loop back into value for the token.
Exactly.
Can you tell us what kind of value is closed back to the token to keep that token valuable? Because without a valuable token, then there's no value in people uploading data, which kind of the loop kind of fails in and of itself. So how do you go from Sai to bringing that value back to the token?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, the market has to believe that Sai has value.
Yeah.
Right. This is always the starting point. This is no different, even if you were to raise in Web 2, right? Like, the starting point of Uber is some VC believe that Uber will have value, right? So they cut a check for hundreds of millions of dollars to say, hey, go build a technology, and here's, you can use $100 million to subsidize initial drivers to come onto the platform. At that point, Uber doesn't make money. It's building network effects, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with Web3 tokens as well. Initially is a belief in that this model ultimately will generate revenue. Now, what Web3 allows us to do is theoretically accelerate the speed at which these network effects build, which is very important. So the time that it took Uber to scale to whatever it was, maybe the Web3 version of it, if it was executed correctly, could have cut down that time into half, or maybe 3/4 or whatever. So that's kind of the general underlying premise, and that's no different between traditional kind of cash funded businesses relative to Web3 businesses. Now, the credibility of why Sai will monetize is rooted in the fact that we solved a very difficult backend engineering problem, and there is an inherent demand and gap in the market for the critical services that we bring, which is this kind of benchmarking capability, as well as a platform to onboard the best and brightest research engineers. There's many traditional precedents that have been out there in the market to demonstrate that these business models work. Primarily Hugging Face, even XPRIZE, Kaggle, these are all examples of businesses that have scaled using this kind of playbook. Now, what we're targeting is a specific area called reinforcement learning that we think is a future contributor to AI scaling progress, whereas historically it's largely been LLMs. RL stands to be, I think, a critical kind of unlock of a lot of the things that are going to continue to propel AI forward. And then on top of that, RL being applied to robotics is very important, because robotics is one of the critical industries that's about to scale in AI. So we're taking a business model that has demonstrated its efficacy and applying it to a gap in the market, where where we all probably agree that this market has tremendous amount of TAM. And it's actually a critical bottleneck that we believe is slowing the progress of the industry down. You need impartial third-party benchmarking to help reveal the information in this market to see who's ahead. And this actually allows competition to become more efficient, right? So that, to us, is kind of like the credibility behind Sai as a platform in terms of how it's going to monetize. And then ultimately that monetization will flow back to the token through a variety of different ways. Like obviously buyback is one channel, but we can use it also for ways to kind of invest in other capabilities behind the token ecosystem as well to help it grow.
I love that example with Uber. I think it's fascinating, because for those that don't know, Uber operated at a pretty significant loss for years and years and years on VC money, on funded money. And then when they actually kind of kicked into gear with their revenue, they quickly scaled to an economic shift when it comes to people getting jobs. So I love the way you framed that for NRN. And I think it's spot on. And I think that conversation we see so often is, okay, we need buybacks now. We need value accrual to the token now. And the fact is, no, you want to bootstrap until you're at that point. So fascinating take there. Maybe as we kind of keep pushing this towards a wrap up here, give us an idea of roadmap, anything you got coming up, what you're most excited for, etc.
Yeah, I think on the product side is first releasing our data collection pipeline and platform. So what that means for the market is you can actually now experience what it's like to one, teleoperate robots in simulation. It kind of feels game-esque. And what you're actually doing is you're creating the data that's helping to kind of train these models. And then we'll feature these models in like competitive settings, which makes it fun. And because Web3 is really about kind of attention capture. So we still want to utilize the technology that we're creating to generate that attention and buzz around the project. And that serves a purpose because it continues to bring more and more attention to the token, and the token should elevate in value, which accelerates our ability to deliver on the flywheel on the side, which makes monetization faster and value accrue back to the token faster. So
wait,
all these things are related.
Yeah, and can I butt in? You see like Cluely going very viral right now, and you see like there's this build in public startup culture we're seeing, and you kind of hinted at that a bit by with the Web3 feature and keeping everyone excited and that side of the business. How are you guys trying to maybe go viral and make this thing just a household name, if you will?
Yeah, I think that's where we kind of lean on our gaming background, right? Where you have to make things entertaining. You want to make them entertaining. You want to make it competitive. Maybe feature speculative elements behind that experience, which is quintessentially Web3. And things like robotic combat, robot racing, like those things naturally capture attention. Like people just like it.
Have you seen the Fight Club in San Francisco? Robotics Fight Club?
Yeah. And we're actually working with them. So, you know, some of those, just one segue, all of those robots right now are remote controlled. Just so you know, right? Like, is someone controlling it?
Growing up,
I played with
BattleBots
them.
was huge.
Yeah. So what we're doing is, and we show, you know, the whole YP dance pipeline, like we're trying to use that to train models so that these robots are fighting autonomously, i.e. no one's controlling it.
That's crazy.
Right? So, and then the kicker on top of that is like, how do you make the audience part of that experience? We can use our data collection platform where you guys can go on the platform and actually control the robot and teach it different skills and know that your contribution has actually helped that robot perform in the ring to some degree.
That's
right?
a crazy idea.
And you can get rewarded specifically for how valuable your data was in that robot's ultimate capabilities. So this is our way of like not only creating really interesting experiences, but make people feel more vested because they were a part of the process, so that you weren't just a casual consumer of that content. It's almost like, you know, as soon as you compete in fantasy sports or in sports betting, like the game becomes more intense because you're vested, right? So this is kind of creating that similar tether. So that's generally our approach on the Web3 side in terms of it's really experience led, and obviously there's a content layer to that. There's an events layer to that. There's a partnership layer to that. We're going to be rolling out a lot of announcements with partners beyond just Kodak. A lot of the other robotics projects featured in the ecosystem. So those are all coming down the pipe. And then the other thing is, I think specifically as it relates to NRN, we are also thinking about expanding the liquidity footprint to other ecosystems beyond just Arbitrum. So that's something to kind of look forward to, because we know we get a lot of feedback there from the community in terms of access to the token. So that would be getting rolled out. But yeah, and then Psi independently is going to continue to scale. We're going to go and continue to bring research talent onto the platform. We're going to expand to Asia schools, European schools. We're going to be doing a lot of local grassroots level community building with professors, student kind of clubs, as well as leveraging kind of professional networks through our advisors as well. And hopefully over the next 6 months, you guys will be seeing some more kind of household names as it relates to kind of enterprise partners that we're going to be rolling out through Psi as well.
I have another question around the token itself. So on this show, we've covered kind of the rise of internet capital markets, ICM, and we've had a number of thinkers from Solana Foundation talking about things like tokenized equity, and we're seeing these launch pads now come out with like equity anchor tokens and all this kind of stuff. I'm just wondering if like you don't have to answer this, you can answer how you would like, but have you thought about any like equity rights for the token holders in any way, whether it's a percentage or something that gives kind of like I think one of the blockers for a lot of investors is like, okay, cool, but still the token doesn't really represent something of the business value other than maybe revenue share one day. As those laws get more mature, which they're about to, like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the debate and the innovation and the experimentation is all good. Like I'm perfectly supportive of the community kind of iterating on historical kind of like standards, etc. I think many times though in Web3, we're largely impatient. Right. There's always like a lot of expectation debt, and we constantly iterate on things that, in my opinion, is putting the cart before the horse. Right. Figure out the business first. Like make the business make money. Okay. Like when you have a business that make money, everything else on the token side makes sense. Like I don't really care how you design it. It just works. right? And then you have the flexibility of being able to like think about different mechanics around value accrual. Maybe like you start to securitize tokens, right? There's different types of cash flow profile, like structures that you can design to bifurcate for different types of investor needs. Kind of like what MicroStrategy has done with like public equity vehicle, right? They have all these different types of preferred and convert structures that they bring to the market because there are different types of investor profiles that want exposures in different ways. You can do that with tokens easily. But the problem is, like, if you design that ahead of having a viable business, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, the community gets excited about, oh, this is a really cool new primitive. And it's like, at some point they realize, well, it doesn't make money. So who cares? Like, none of these actually work. So I think, you know, I personally feel like once you solve the product market fit and an actual scalable business, then come back and really engineer kind of token design, because then it becomes real, it becomes exciting, and you can actually test things in a more immediate way. Because right now, like if you don't actually have the business, like it's all hypothetical how this works. It's just like a recursive expectation Ponzi loop, right? So the only valve that creates value is marginal attention coming into your token that converts to someone buying the token at a higher value. And we know that's not sustainable. Like the attention cycle is only sustainable for a finite period of time. You have an option and it expires at some point. So I don't mind all the innovation and stuff, but like I would just but I think this is just human nature. Like I'm not like criticizing the community anyway, but like this is just how we operate. But I think from our perspective, it's always like, let's really tackle a problem that exists in the world. Take a legitimate shot at becoming the first to really create the market. And if we do, I'm highly confident everything else would take care of itself on the token side.
I mean, think about it from like a monetization standpoint for a business anyway, right? The business shoots to provide value first and then aims to derive monetization after the fact, not vice versa, right? So you kind of compare that to tokens, right?
Yeah, exactly. But look, people like to punt on this stuff, right? Because
it's fun. Our people want to know the token.
Degens must degen.
Well, I guess what's still missing there is the guarantees, right? Because it's human nature. I go out, I build a great company, and then I'm like, well, this was great, but now that I have all this stuff, I don't really need to give anything back to the community, back to the token. And so the guarantees is what's missing. I think in theory, your idea is perfectly spot on, but how can we guarantee that from founders?
I would say historically that's largely been a regulatory problem. Yeah. Because under the old regime, we can't make explicit guarantees, because then you run the risk of your business being offside with non-existent regulation. But then Gensler comes after you anyway, because you broke a law you didn't know existed. So that was extremely frustrating, right? To be a builder in that environment, like you just like, what the hell do I do? And I'm hopeful that clarity does come from the regulatory channel, so that good actors can actually act good and create value and be transparent and create those guarantees that now creates confidence in the market.
Yeah. Right? And reality is the only reason a meme bubble really maybe existed was because the regulatory constraints meant you couldn't actually build anything real with tokens. So it's like, all right, well, we'll just trade pictures of a dog and get excited about that. But I think once this changes, and it is, I mean, they're signaling that this is about to change really soon. I think, we'll see attention, liquidity, et cetera, kind of focus on things that are real. And something like you're building, obviously, is got a little more substance than most billion-dollar market cap meme coins. But
yeah, I'm hopeful that is coming soon, because
that's the bet our show has made in terms of like this internet capital markets, is like we're trying to drag the meme coin people from the meme coin promoters over to us.
Yeah.
We're trying to save them from themselves.
100%. I think part of it is like, I mean, the flip side is I think Web3 has taught us that this notion of like attention capital markets and its derivatives, or internet capital markets, or whatever you want to label it, is something that's going to stay, right? This is the new world of where we operate in. So you can't really just have like a head in the sand strategy of saying, well, the old way worked a certain way and we don't believe in this new paradigm. Because I mean, look, if you even look at like small cap stocks and equities and things like Reddit and Wall Street, like it's very similar to Web3. Like it's all the same stuff. Like people consume information in the same way, capital flows in a similar way. Robinhood and those super apps in a variety of different ways is actually more degen than the clunkiness of a Web3 experience. And they've made it extremely efficient to just punt on stuff and speculate through like things like zero dated options. And now there's going to be like prediction market integration into those platforms. Like this is where the world is trending. So I don't think like for us who are part of the Web3 community, I think we are learning a critical skill set in terms of navigating these new types of market structures. But ultimately, as a builder, I would love for that attention to be diverted at things that are actually creating value ultimately.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah, and I think that's really the point of the shows like ours, streams like this one, where we dive into the side of things where value is actually being generated, innovation is actually being built, and I think that's a testament of you guys and what you're doing over at NRN. So shout out to what you guys are building. I mean, amazing technology, and I know that you guys are working on that relationship with Codec as well. I think, just like you mentioned, it is complementary. So shout out to you guys for building something actually real and valuable.
No, I appreciate that. We appreciate that. And thanks for lending the time and having me on. It's been a lot of fun. I think we touched a little bit on everything, and could go on for hours about the AI stuff, but we'll save that for another time.
We'll have to have like a debate at some point, Wei. I think you nailed pretty much every concept on the head here. So if we ever get a debate that we can set up, we'll put you in because, like you said, we could go for hours too. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Happy to do so.
And we could do a Kodak NRN stream at some point because their community is like super involved. So if something big comes down the pipe with that, let us know because Kodak was cool.
Yeah. Mo just sent us a message, so I'll relay it in the private chat. So
you're the man, Wei. Thanks for jumping on, brother.
All right, appreciate you guys. Take care.
Chat soon.